Office parking war. Throwaway because my brother thinks I'm guilty and I don't need him chiming in. I'm not asking if I am. I'm 25 years old and I work in an office. The front of the office is for client parking only, so it isn't overcrowded. The back of the office has our employee parking. The front of the office has 3 handicap parking spots, and the back has none. It technically meets whatever requirements it has to. I lost both of my legs from the knees down in a terrible accident as a teen. I had to relearn to walk, have constant pain, and can't go for long distances. Carrying anything heavy is also a big challenge. I've made it work with my prosthetics and the occasional use of a wheelchair if my stumps really ache. All that said, I never wear skirts or shorts. I don't like the stares, the questions, or the unsolicited advice. When I started working my job, I asked if I would be parking out front, but my office just gave me a reserved parking spot next to the back door instead. They even hung a little sign that marks it as reserved. I suggested to management they put a handicap or 2 parking spots in the back after working there for a while, but they declined as there wasn't a need for it because I had my reserved spot. I figured they would reserve another spot to anyone else who would need it since they had a temporary reservation area for any of the pregnant coworkers. Last week was a bad week as one of my legs splintered. It's the best word I have to describe it, after a bit of a fumble on my part. So I had no choice but to use the wheelchair until I could get my replacement. Since I dislike being legless as it makes me very self-conscious, I still wore it. I pulled into the back parking lot to see my spot taken up by a pretty little car. I'm a sucker for green. The other front parking was also taken, so all that was left was the parking in the way back. I just turned around, pulled the front client parking area and parked. I hung up my placard and went inside. I immediately found my boss and explained about my leg, the parking, and what I had done. He wasn't pleased someone took my spot and told me to just get working and he would look into it. Sometime around lunch, he found me and explained it was the boss's kid. She had started working here and didn't know about the parking. He said she wouldn't be parked there again tomorrow. Cool, just a newbie and a mix-up. Next day rolls around and that pretty little car is back where it doesn't belong. I do the same as the day before and my boss looks frustrated. He heads off to have a chat. At some point my boss comes back to me with a stack of paperwork. He told me that the new girl was kicking up a fuss about the parking spot and trying to threaten him because, you know who my dad is, right? So he is done with it all. Instead of taking it up the ladder and fighting against her to get the boss man to see reason, he is putting it to HR about the lack of handicap parking in the back. From the time I started working here till now, we have changed hands inside of HR and our accessibility department, and he knows there are a few of them that are very accommodating. I filled out the paperwork and he took it off. The rest of last week I had to park in the front and everyone was getting annoyed with it for one reason or another. Special treatment for me or anger at the new girl for kicking out someone who actually needed the parking spot. A lot of people had started giving her a cold treatment and she couldn't understand why. More people have been checking on me and offering to help carry things. She has seen that and thinks I'm not pretty enough for that kind of attention, and that I'm unprofessional. This morning I checked the back again and her little car was all the way in the back. In my old reserve spot is now a bright and shiny handicap sign. I rolled in to hear her complaining loudly to the front-end staff and demanding they set a time for her to meet with Daddy today because she can't be bothered to walk across a parking lot on perfectly healthy legs, judging by her skirt and heels. I would trade our legs in an instant so she could keep the damn parking spot. Sorry, guess I needed to vent a little. And I'm worried about what she might say to her daddy, and how it will affect me. Let's listen to some comments from the community before I read the update.
Too bad your brother is such a jackass that you had to use a throwaway to write this. Your company doesn't sound much better than your brother. I think it's time to move on from both. Good luck.
Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't businesses required to have at least one handicapped spot? Anyways, F your brother for saying you're the ass. If anyone is, it's the boss's kid and your brother.
The last time I checked the Americans with Disabilities Act, you needed one handicap spot for every 25 parking spots. So if you have 100 spots, 4 must be reserved for handicap. If you have 76 spots, 4 must be handicap.
Update. 1 day later. I appreciated the kind words to my annoying little rant yesterday. My brother can be pretty hard to deal with as he has a very difficult time understanding others. Maybe he didn't get enough hugs as a kid, who knows. I know not a lot of people are looking for an update, but it felt nice to have a few people on my side. That said, nothing really happened yesterday. It wasn't until I was home from work that things started to pick up. My boss called after hours. He never does this, and strongly suggested I wear a skirt to work tomorrow and then leave early for an appointment, with time off that he had approved of. When pressed, he said he really couldn't go into details because my reactions would tell a lot. I asked if there was any way to get out of wearing the skirt, and he suggested to bring a blanket to drape over my legs. My boss has never asked me for anything like this before, but I had the feeling this was to drive home a point. So, against my own feelings, I wore the skirt and went into work today. I wore the blanket over my legs into my office and worked until I was called in for a surprise meeting between me, my boss, the owner, and HR. My boss gave me a pointed look at my legs before we entered the meeting, so I put the blanket on the back of my wheelchair. The owner looked absolutely annoyed to be there, borderline angry, and stood up to say something but seemed to freeze, and I could hear his teeth click as he shut his mouth. He went to stare out the window as we, HR, my boss, and me, discussed his daughter's actions and words. Apparently, a few people had put in complaints about her for me. The owner asked one question the entire time. "How long have you been?" "Well, when did you lose your legs?" I answered and offered up proof, but my boss said it was already on file for my accommodations, and can be checked there. The owner stormed out after that. HR thanked me for my time and sent me back to my office. By noon, I was leaving and the owner's daughter was packing up her space, crying while her father stood over her with the darkest expression I had ever seen on him. He frustrates easily but hardly ever yells. I can count on one hand how many times he has yelled. He was shouting her down the entire time she packed. I just rolled by as quietly as I could because I didn't want to be sucked in. My boss texted that the owner has approved me to work from home, as needed, and I will be getting a pay raise outside of the usual annual raise and bonuses. He also said that the owner will be making his daughter apologize. This turned out better than I had thought it would. Thank you everyone for listening. Let's listen to some comments from the community before the end of the video.
Awesome. I guess Daddy really didn't want a lawsuit.
I think it is awesome you have such a great boss. And the owner isn't completely stupid. Owner did manage to raise an entitled daughter, but it sounds like she is finally learning about karma. Better now than later. A valuable life lesson.
My dad used to own a pretty big successful business before he sold it and retired. And let me tell you, if me or my siblings ever pulled that kind of crap while we worked for him, we did odd jobs every once in a while, our dad would have had choice words to say to us right at the beginning. It wouldn't have to be proven like you had to. If that spot was reserved for someone, it didn't matter why it was reserved. We had to respect it. Because my dad trusted his employees to do what they should be doing and do it right.
So I assumed that she claimed the author was lying about being handicapped. But this. How long have you been? Well, when did you lose your legs? Implies a timeline question was brought up. Maybe she was accused of cutting off her legs to get the spot designated handicapped for her.
You didn't happen to lose your legs sometime after my daughter was accused of being the biggest douchebag in the world in this meeting, did you?
Thank you for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments if you agree with the community. What would you have done in that situation? And for those who stayed to the end, thank you. If you like this type of content, feel free to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. See you soon.